And with that, I'm going to say, for one of the final times, not the final time, but one of the final times, as always, my friends, remember, it's just a theory. A game theory. Thank you. Thank you for watching.
And now, the end is here, and so he faces that final curtain. My friend, I'll make it clear, I'll state his case, of which I'm certain. He's lived a life that's full, and he's traveled each and every highway, and more, much more than that. He did it his way. It's hard to accept when things have ran their course. It's hard to understand and accept when it's over. And it's important to look back not with anger or contempt, but to look back with a smile. Don't be sad that it's over. Smile that it happened in the first place. MatPat, this is his final FNAF game theory. And honestly, I didn't think I would live to see this day. That was until he made his announcement on Goodbye Internet. Which it really makes me just understand, like, it really made me understand why he was doing what he was doing. And honestly, he has done more than enough to make a mark on the internet. People are going to be talking about his theories for years to come. People are still going to be saying, hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. And, you know, I guess I could basically say the same. This is a reaction. A renegade reaction. And, nah, I'm just joking. We aren't, like... don't worry. Eventually, we will start the video. But I just wanted to just say that this is a very, like, I remember the first FNAF theory I watched, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun, and once again, there were things that were wrong. There were things that were right. There were things that were grossly over exaggerated, and there were things that were focused on into like the most minute of details. And you know what? That's honestly perfectly fine. Because after all, as MatPat says, it's just a theory. A game theory. And we might as well just jump on into this. This is Game Theory, FNAF. Thanks for the memories. Let's see what old Matty Patterson has to say about FNAF one more time. Here we go. Let's get into it.
Well, loyal theorists, this is it. Well, loyal theorists, this is it. This will be my final FNAF theory. And this time, I mean it.
Damn it.
The end is nearly at hand. The pieces are in place for you. You missed it last week. Look for the green. And remember everything I taught you. Remember, dates are important. Remember the... Hurry, time is running out.
2 game theories
Hello,
remain.
Internet. Welcome to Game Theory, the show that, by my count, has had no less than 10 final FNAF theories. At this point, it's practically become its own meme, but this time, it's no joke. After 66 theories, 3 live talkbacks, and 1 bangin' remix.
Exotic buttons.
Make that 2 bangin' remixes. Today, I end my coverage of Five Nights at Freddy's. After this, there's only 1 final game theory, and then the curtain closes on my time as host, and Tom will have to step into the spotlight. Hope you're ready for the challenge there, Tom. Tom?
Toy Bunny, Easter Bunny, Chocolate Bunny, Melted Chocolate Bunny, Withered Bunny, Blackheart Bunny, Rockstar Bunny, Glamrock Bunny, Sunken Toy Bunny, Bonbon, Just Bon, System Error Bunny, Nightmare Bunny.
Well done, but how many toes does he have?
2? No, 3. 5?
Again. The first step of FNAF theorizing. Slowly losing your mind. I think he's gonna do just fine. You know, I did consider making my
fair
final
enough.
theory about FNAF, but I actually have something really special planned for that one. So special, in fact, that we're gonna be doing a premiere for it on this channel next Saturday, March 9th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. We're gonna have some fun. You guys will be able to chat with me live as that video releases. And who knows, there might even be some secrets to find. And most importantly of all, I get to say my final goodbye and thank you to all of you for the last 13 years. So that's next week, March 9th at 2 p.m.
There we
Eastern,
go.
11 a.m. Pacific. Make sure you're subscribed so you're notified when that one goes live. Speaking of March 9th, just a quick reminder that that's also the final day of sales for my U2s. Once I retire as host on the 9th of March, it too will retire and be gone forever. So if you do want this little piece of game theory history, or, you know, your own little psychic friend Fredbear, head on over to U2s.com or click the link in the description to grab your MatPat figurine and FNAF pins before they're nothing but a distant memory. Kind of like Dream Theory, but enough housekeeping, it's time to talk about FNAF. And let me tell you, I've spent a long time thinking about this one. How do you end a series like this? Should I just do a normal theory about some minute detail? Doesn't really feel final, you know? Plus, I'd probably end up calling someone a robot, and then a bunch of people would get mad at me again. Should I redo the ultimate FNAF timeline as one final, here's the lore? Well, that would certainly be big, but it also doesn't feel
You've
like
already
that
done
much
it.
was changed post-Ruin and Help Wanted 2 from what we did at the end of last
Oh,
year.
right.
So I didn't really want to be redundant either. You can see the struggle that I was facing, right? This episode, it's a big deal to me. It is literally the end of my legacy with FNAF. And you see, that's when it hit me. Legacy. Typically, FNAF theories are born out of the small details, but what if I took a step back and looked at the big picture? What if instead of counting animatronic toes or dead kids, I took a meta approach and just looked at the entire legacy of FNAF? I'm sure we're all familiar with the butterfly effect, right? The idea that a butterfly flapping its wings could cause the smallest of changes in the air, which could potentially lead to a tornado forming. Well, the term actually comes from the research of meteorologist Edward Lorenz, who, back in 1963, decided to round some numbers in his data. He condensed one variable from 0.506127 to just 0.506. And yet, that tiny change right there completely threw off his computer's weather models, transforming sunny skies into violent storms, hence the whole tornado thing. This realization that small changes in data could yield such tremendously different results ultimately threw off science's entire understanding of nature. Before Lorenz, people thought that the universe could ultimately be predicted. Sir Isaac Newton back in 1687 famously believed in the clockwork universe, the idea that the parts of the universe worked like a machine, and that eventually, if you understood how the parts worked, you could predict practically anything. French mathematician Pierre-Simon Laplace actually said basically the same thing. Eventually, we would get to a place where nothing would be uncertain. And yet, Lorenz showed us that one small change, one minor mistake or estimate or imprecise measurement in a complex system could have a domino effect at a massive scale, resulting in changes that you would never see coming.
Honestly, that's just anything, dude. Anything out there, the smallest little thing that's missed, the smallest detail, like in any investigation, the smallest little detail that's missed immediately just completely derails any kind of investigation or any kind of like eureka moment that could lead to the solving of the crime. Or in sports, you pass the ball just half a second too early, the ball arrives too early to the goal, the guy misses, like your teammate misses, or you throw it too late, the buzzer sounds, you lose. It happens so much. I mean, it's basically like chaos. You can't really account for chaos in the grand scheme of things.
For example, in 1928, Alexander Fleming discovered that there was mold in his petri dish, but rather than just throwing it away or cleaning it up, he decided to study it, which then led to the discovery of penicillin, a life-saving antibiotic that could be used to treat meningitis, pneumonia, gonorrhea, syphilis, blood poisoning, and many others. Or if you want another example, you have the explosion of hip-hop music largely owing its origins to a random lightning strike in New York City. In 1977, a bolt of lightning put the city of New York into a 25-hour blackout. So what do you do for all that time that you're stuck in the dark? You loot and pillage, baby. New Yorkers started to ransack storefronts, including music shops full of instruments and supplies. Suddenly, expensive DJ equipment was in the hands of young aspiring musicians eager to experiment with hip-hop, which was a new genre of music just hitting the local scene. And thus, hip-hop was truly able to thrive. History is full of these sorts of stories, from the foundations of medicine and music to even stuff as extreme as the origins of both World War I and II. Why do I bring all this serious stuff up in relation to Spooky Bear Game? Because FNAF is one of those rounded variables. One decision by Scott Cawthon reshaped gaming, and YouTube, and the entire entertainment world as we know it. And that's not an exaggeration for effect. One man's decision to not give up, to try again in the face of rejection and adversity, literally shifted billions of dollars of the economy and affected hundreds of millions of lives in ways that are incalculable. And that is what I wanted to call attention to in my final FNAF theory. FNAF shows us that by not giving up, one person can have a profound effect on the course of history itself. I feel like the origin story of FNAF's been talked about to death, but just to set the stage here, despite hitting it big with FNAF in 2014, its creator Scott Cawthon had been making games at that point for 20 years, since 1994. And yet, even in those earliest days, you can tell that Scott had a fascination with creepy robots, working their designs into projects like the sci-fi Iffer Moon and the religious Pilgrim's Progress. Even this incredibly rudimentary RPG Legacy of Flan has a final boss that has what looks to be the first appearance of what would eventually evolve into the Mangle. But despite producing a lot of games, none really ever caught the public's eye. And then came Chipper & Sons Lumber Company, where initial reviews, what few there were rough. And as the story goes, it was the reaction to James Stephanie Sterling that would change the course of Cawthon's career forever. Thank God for her.
It's just all over the place, and that thing looks like it's gonna kill your children. I imagine the phrase "kill me" is stated over and over again in the world of Chipper and Sons. Oh, they're robot beavers. That's not good. I think he's the only living thing in this world.
This repeated criticism, plus the lack of financial stability, brought Scott down to his lowest. Ready to quit games, he decided to try one final time and lean into the thing that had been leveled at him time and time again, the creepy robotic animations. And thus, Five Nights at Freddy's was born. And that right there, that's gonna act as our nexus point. The one flap of a butterfly wing. The decision to make a final game instead of just giving up. Now, let's see how it all maps out from there. Let's start with just the obvious downstream effects of this. That one game, over the course of the last decade, has spun off into 12. Which honestly, I've never truly sat down and processed. But believe it or not, there are 12 of these things, depending on how you count them. The entire franchise has sold 9.9 million copies on Steam alone, which in total has an estimated revenue of $94 million. And that's not even including the console and mobile ports or the number of microtransactions for FNAF AR, which itself had over 40 million downloads. It's also worth pointing out that of the $94 million, 55 million of that was just from Steam sales of Security Breach, because that one was actually at full price as opposed to all the others, which were either free or a couple of bucks. And while the first 4 FNAF games were entirely a one-man job, the rest have included voice actors, composers, entirely separate game studios like Steel Wool and Illumix. Even to this day, we're seeing this continue with studios like Megacat, who up until now have been focused on releasing games on retro consoles, very niche market, but that made them perfect to create the retro-style pixelated FNAF game Into the Pit, releasing later this year. By pairing up with these smaller companies that aren't insanely well-known, Scott's not only been able to make bigger, better games, he's also been able to use his...
I didn't know about that. Into the Pit. That looks very interesting. I mean, that... like,
pixelated FNAF.
That's really, really cool. I like that.
Game Into the Pit, releasing later this year. By pairing up with these smaller companies that aren't insanely well known, Scott's not only been able to make bigger, better games, he's also been able to use his single game success to put millions of eyeballs and millions of dollars into each of these companies. As a result of their work with FNAF, Illumix started working with Disney on features found throughout the parks. And if Steel Wool ever do release a game outside of FNAF in the future, you can bet that it's gonna have itself a fan base attached to it because people now know about them, and they're gonna want to see what other work they can do. So that's on the game side. Or
honestly, Steel Wool, I would want them to move on to working, like, because they've proven that they're good at making VR games. I would love to see what they're capable of when it comes to doing VR games for other things, because they've shown that they're very inventive when it comes to VR. And also, not only that, but also Security Breach, while not having the best execution and also launching in a very, very paltry state, has actually become not only very playable, but has become one of the better experiences overall in the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. And then, of course, Ruin, which just, holy crap. Anyway, sorry.
Or at least it's on the official game side, but stopping there would be overlooking the much bigger impact FNAF has had on the games that haven't even been released yet. This one series inspired a whole new generation of game designers unlike any game that's ever really come before. All of them cutting their teeth on a genre that exploded in the mid-2010s, the FNAF fan game. Five Nights at Treasure Island, Five Nights at Wario's, Pop Goes, The Joy of Creation, Those Nights at Rachel's, Afton Built, Glitched Attraction, Bloody Nights Juniors, Day Shift at Freddy's.
Thanks.
Thank.
What is this game?
I could go on and on and on for days. Some of these were just for the memes, others were more serious attempts at making games inspired by FNAF, and many of them were just taking the world that Scott had created and broadening it outward into the game that they wanted to see made. If you go onto Game Jolt, you'll find thousands of fan games, and I do mean thousands. If you search just for FNAF and select games, you're presented with 36 games per page and 277 pages available.
That is insane. That is literally, like, nuts. How the heck? Wow. I didn't realize that. Wow.
That is 9,961 games that are tagged using FNAF. And if you're sitting there thinking, hold on, the math there doesn't add up, you're right, good noticing. That's because I had to remove 11 of Scott's own games that were posted on that list. Though, I'm pretty sure that there are some out there who'd like to pretend that FNAF World was a fan game. Each and every one of those 10,000 fan games represents a budding game designer, sometimes several. And while yeah, many of those creators are likely never going to pursue game design full time, there are some who will, either independently or as part of a bigger studio, going on to have their shot at creating their own mega franchise, their shot to transform the industry. And already you can see that some of these devs are finding success, to the point where many of them have created multiple different games at this point, turning their fan projects into full-on franchises of their own. And all of this is without even mentioning the Fanverse initiative, where Scott invested money and resources into some of the most promising projects to help those fledgling businesses grow. Now, the success of that one is up for debate for various reasons, but the point...
Yeah, that one, I really was upset when FNAF Plus was pulled, but at the same time, it's just one of those things, man.
Ultimately stands, Five Nights at Freddy's has been directly and indirectly involved in the rise of a new generation of game developers. Developers that, just now, 10 years later, we're only starting to see get to a point where they're really influencing the wider gaming landscape. Except gaming, it's already seen a massive shift coming off the heels of FNAF. Prior to FNAF's release, if you took a look at any top 10 list about horror games, it would have been filled with games like Outlast, PT, Amnesia, games that leaned hard into psychological horror and sometimes graphic gore. FNAF, though, was different. While other horror games use the classic horror trope of not knowing what the monster looked like, relying on the audience's mind to fill in the blanks of what might be lurking in the shadows, FNAF put the monsters front and center, allowing them to be the star of the show like we see in movies like Friday the 13th and Halloween. This allowed FNAF games to be much more thumbnail friendly and easier to sell online compared to the spooky dark hallways or overcomplicated monster designs that dominated the horror space in the past.
Yeah, and here's the thing, I look at these here. These are jarring. These are very, very jarring. Especially just like, I love the fact that Mark went through the effort of illuminating the teeth and the eyes. And that's just, so good.
More thumbnail friendly.
And of course, Jacksepticeye doing the same thing, but instead putting the septic eye
easier to sell online compared to the spooky dark hallways or overcomplicated monster designs that dominated the horror space in the past. Mix in the more family-friendly scares of Freddy and the Gang, and you've got yourself a brand new subgenre of content, mascot horror, as dubbed by YouTuber John Wolf. This genre took old nostalgic locations and filled them with brightly colored killers brought to life through some weird experiment or trauma. Bendy and the Ink Machine, Poppy Playtime, Rainbow Friends, My Friendly Neighborhood, Hello Neighbor, Baldi's Basics, Choo Choo Charles, Amanda the Adventure, and of course, Carton of Ban Ban. That's not even dipping into the hundreds of lesser-known titles like Joyville. It was FNAF who paved the way for all of these games. Poppy sold 2 million copies in 2 years. Bendy has made over $30 million just off of its 2 major installments. Hello Neighbor is a thing that continues to exist. And while people complain about oversaturation in the market at this point, there is no denying that the formula has worked extremely well for the better part of the last 10 years. But maybe you're sick of games. You want to read a book? Well, I hope you're excited to read the 7 Hello Neighbor books, 5 Bendy books, or the Poppy Playtime Employee Handbook that's coming out later this year. Mascot horror franchises now also line the shelves of your local Barnes & Noble. Why? Because FNAF did it first. Oh sure, Scholastic had done some video game book publishing in the past, mostly guidebooks and activity books, but after the success of the FNAF trilogy, they began to publish other video game books like Assassin's Creed Last Descendants, World of Warcraft Traveler. This led them to launch an entirely separate...
See, this is what a lot of people have been hoping for, myself included, is that video games start breaking into the mainstream and basically are taken seriously, are taken as seriously as other forms of art out there. Because for the longest time, people have just seen video games as just, video games. That video games don't really have any say or any weight to them. Like, they're just simple things for kids to play. It's like, no, dude. Video games there's so much more to video games than just that. And the fact that people don't realize that, the fact that people are still in that boat blows me away. But thankfully it does seem like video games are in fact going to be taken more seriously. For instance, the Super Mario Brothers movie last year, and then the FNAF movie last year, then the Last of Us TV series on HBO. And I know there are others that came out that honestly we don't even need to talk about. So yeah, anyway, that's the thing.
Separate wing to their business, AFK, the video game specific book department. It's these guys who are publishing all the books that Tom is now gonna have to read. No, it's impossible to know for certain that FNAF was the reason for all this, but given it was often shown at the top of articles for this new publishing arm at launch and has sold 9 million books to date, with an average book price being about $10, that is $90 million infused into the historically struggling print publishing business. It's no wonder the first 6 rows of their website are dedicated to FNAF. But without AFK, it's easy to imagine a world where these other mascot horror games didn't get that chance, and all those writers who've now been able to make a living off of these franchises wouldn't be recognized like they are. I mean, take for instance Andrea Wagner, who wrote the vast majority of Fazbear Frights and Tales from the Pizzaplex stories. She's now getting DM'd by fans asking for lore clarifications, something I'm sure she never anticipated while working on her past writing projects, like her dog how-to book, Dog Parenting, or Alternate Beauty, the story of a big girl with big dreams. Her words, not mine. The same thing is now happening with another struggling industry, movies. After spending 8 years in production hell, losing directors, struggling with studios, and trying to nail down a script, Blumhouse eventually took the chance on FNAF, making the movie on a $20 million budget and earning back nearly $300 million. If you don't think Hollywood has taken strong notice of that when they are struggling to get butts in seats, you are wrong. You think it's a coincidence that 2 months after FNAF's release, Bendy announced his big screen debut? And while a Poppy Playtime movie was already in the works with Studio 71, I can almost guarantee conversations with studios around it have shifted in the aftermath of FNAF.
Yeah, and while they won't get massive budgets of $175 million to $200 to potentially $300 million, these films don't need that. These films don't need budgets that exceed literally that of a small nation. Instead, a meager budget of $30 million to potentially $50 million, that's all you need. That is literally all you need.
And who knows what other mascot horror games might end up with movies down the line. And not only is it getting indie game movies greenlit, it's also reshaping film studio priorities, as they continue to fumble around in the dark, struggling to find ways to compete with online content.
Yeah. This shit right here, the fact that Disney, Warner Brothers, Disney,
content, I've literally had conversations with people in the film space about how they're trying to tap into that FNAF audience, that online community. The success of this one film will be shaping the types of movies that get made and how they look moving forward. I guarantee it. But while movie releases mean big bucks for big studios, the economic ramifications go way beyond just extra cash in the pocket of Jason Blum. The FNAF movie was shot in New Orleans, which, since Hurricane Katrina, has been an economically depressed part of the country. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but from speaking to local actors and business owners while I was down there filming last year, I learned that New Orleans actually has a long history in film production. When the state government of Louisiana first introduced tax breaks for film productions back in 2002, over 1,000 projects happened down there in the span of 7 years. Those productions created jobs, hired locals, and brought millions of dollars back into the city. However, pre-COVID, those incentives were rolled back, and productions have now started to move to other places like Georgia. That's why so many of the local actors and business owners I spoke with while down there were eager to see the FNAF movie in town. By shooting in New Orleans, a huge chunk of that $20 million budget was going to accommodations, drivers, caterers, local talent, location rentals, equipment, and other general resources that help local businesses thrive, and maybe start a domino effect to get other movies back in the region. Regardless of all of that, the point is that this one decision to try one final...
I remember when Wilmington, North Carolina was a huge place for people to film stuff. I remember that for the longest time that's how it was. And then it was like overnight, North Carolina was just like, nope, we're not going to allow any more tax incentives in North Carolina for filmmaking. And then the film community in Wilmington just dried up. Then what? Nothing. Literally nothing.
Final game. It's grown beyond itself. It's no longer about just making its own franchise full of games. It's spread to all corners of the media industry and to so many other IPs and creators, spawning a wave of new franchises and giving life to so many careers that otherwise might not have had a chance. But speaking of careers, there's one final area that's also needing to be addressed, an area that has been so affected by FNAF it's crazy to not talk about, and that of course is here on YouTube. FNAF has done a lot of numbers for a lot of industries, but its effect on the YouTube landscape is still visible to this day, and in a much more obvious way. When FNAF first launched, it was just one of many games that YouTubers started playing because spooky games got big views. This game gave rise to some of the biggest names on the platform, names that are still going strong today. Let's players like Corey X Kenshin and Markiplier, who'd been on YouTube for a couple of years but saw their careers accelerate in parallel alongside the FNAF releases. You also had a massive surge in nerdcore musical artists like The Living Tombstone, whose FNAF song was at 1 million views in a couple of weeks, whereas most other songs they would release would have a few 100,000 views months after release. And machinima creators started using FNAF models and characters to tell their own unique stories long before the FNAF movie ever hit theaters, racking up literally billions of views. But what truly set FNAF apart were obviously the hidden details cluing fans into the bigger story. This, more than anything else, ignited the internet's passion like never before, giving rise to the theorist community. People like Dawko, Rezbowski, 8-Bit Ryan, Rytoast, ID's Fantasy, Hyperdroid, John FNAF, and of course, us, going through this game piece by piece in order to find the hidden story within it. Now, contrary to popular belief, FNAF wasn't the first thing that actually had us creating lore theories. That was always just part of the channel's DNA. But before FNAF, we were coming up with lore theories for franchises where the story was basically well known. Whether or not Majora's Mask is an allegory for grieving, you get the story of a moon crashing down. Regardless of whether Peach is Rosalina's mom, you get the basic premise of Mario Galaxy. Humans certainly might be Pokemon. That's not really affecting anyone's journey to become a league champ. But FNAF was different. It showed that games could be built off of withholding the lore and forcing the fanbase to solve it. By leaving the door open and never confirming anything, Scott allowed YouTubers, Redditors, and just general fans to continually assess and reassess the lore, find new directions, new hot takes, and that means that we're still theorizing about it to this very day.
Yes.
Frustrating? Absolutely. Heck, maybe now that I'm retiring from the channel, I can track Scott down and get some answers out of him, but it's also entertaining. And the success of this theory-based model on YouTube has carried over into the mainstream, where now almost every game and movie release is designed with theory crafting in mind. While it's impossible to calculate the full scope of FNAF on YouTube, I was able to find that there are 106 videos with more than 10 million views each. Together, they total roughly 5.4 billion views on just their very own. And if we assume that they're getting the standard gaming CPM on YouTube, which is about $4.55, that then's a total earning across all of those videos of $24,570,000 in ad revenue. Markiplier's literally gone on record to say that the house that he lives in is the house that FNAF paid for. And he's joked on his Distractable podcast about how lucrative FNAF's been for him.
Let's go into a fan favorite here. Five Nights at Freddy's.
Boo. So there's two ways I could look at this, right?
I could look at it from the game purely by itself, or I could look at it at the dividends it is paid out for me specifically.
And that's put him in a position to pursue bigger and loftier projects like the With Markiplier series, and now his movie Iron Lung. One half of the Living Tombstone, Sam Haft, is now writing songs for internet sensations like Has Been Hotel. YouTubers like FNAF and Rytos,
That's
they've been
awesome.
able to go full-time with YouTube, all thanks to FNAF. And heck, look at us. Because of FNAF, we've thrived. We've been able to grow our team, give jobs to dozens of people, and perhaps best of all, we've carved out our own platform that allows us to turn the spotlight onto a next generation of creatives, to make us tastemakers in the space that are able to pay it forward, to make you aware of projects that you should be playing and watching, from Cooking Companions, to The Man in the Suit, to Shipwrecked 64, Welcome Home, Mandela Catalog, Walton Files. The list goes on and on and on. In short, FNAF created an ecosystem where new IPs can thrive, a virtuous cycle that benefited itself, to be sure, but also had a halo effect on dozens of other franchises looking to get attention. And all of this is without even mentioning other trickle-down effects. Our large platform allowed us to run charity events like St. Jude, paying that blessing forward to help doctors and hospitals working on treatments for childhood cancer, where of course, Scott himself was a sizable and direct contributor year after year. There were also dozens of other charity events coming from creators like Dawko, Markiplier, Jacksepticeye, Rye Toast, John FNAF. Not only have these events been able to raise tens of millions of dollars for various organizations looking to do good work in the world, hopefully those events in turn inspired others, you out in the audience or other creators, to adopt a spirit of generosity and giving in their own lives. And again, it all comes down to this one decision. One guy who, in the face of adversity and criticism, chose not to give up. That is the millions of people and billions of dollars affected by that one Spoopy Bear game. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for all of that. And while all of this is cool and impressive and inspirational, it's also overwhelming, right? You look at the impact that one decision like this can have, and you feel like you can never live up. I know that's how I feel sometimes. But remember, it's all about small decisions making a domino effect. Just being kind to someone else, saying something nice, holding a door, listening to someone's problems, making them laugh. All of those are seemingly small things that can make a massive difference in the way someone's day's going. And that, to me, has always been the power of these channels. They're a place to learn a little something, a place to brighten your day in some small way, which then you can pay forward to other people in your life. And that positivity, it spreads. It spreads and creates real massive change. That, to me, honestly, is the hardest thing about leaving these channels, losing that chance to be a force of just a little bit of good in your life. But you know what? I'm not done yet. I'll see you one last time next week, March 9th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, as I celebrate with you one final time as a theorist community. Until then, as always, remember, it's all just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
Well, there you are. That's... Damn, dude. If that's the end, then that's the end. I mean, I don't know what else to say. This is the big thing about game theory that I know that the new host is probably going to just, you know, knock it out of the park, because Matt leaving it in his capable hands, probably everything's gonna work out just great. But I'd be lying if I said I'm not gonna miss this. I would be lying straight through my teeth if I said I wasn't going to miss Matt Pat doing these theories, because I enjoy them. I do. And just knowing that this is it for Five Nights at Freddy's when it comes to Matt Pat, it's... Damn. Like I said, there's just, in some ways, I don't know really how to feel 100%. But it is currently 2:21 in the morning. I'm tired. I need to get up early tomorrow, so I'm going to go ahead and end this here before it gets too late. Thank you all very much for tuning into this. Be sure to check out Game Theory. Be sure to show love for Matt Pat. And also, not only that, but I guess I'll see you all there on March 9th whenever Matt Pat does his final Game Theory. So, until next time, everyone, signing off, I'm Nate. I will see you then. Peace.
Bye.